好，各位朋友，大家好。在之前，我在一个视频中给大家介绍了杰弗里·萨克斯的一段演讲，说导致新冠大流行的病毒并非出自于自然原因，而是来自美国实验室的生物技术的时候，那是节选了一小段录像给大家看的，主要目的呢是想说这个新闻呢是真的。萨克斯参加这个会议的演讲和讨论，完整的总共有2个多小时。我们只看了其中的1分多钟啊，所以我就给大家说这个视频很精彩，有空的时候啊，我给大家看一段完整的内容，大概有20分钟左右吧啊。今天呢我就来兑现了，对于这段视频我已经全部加上了字幕，中英文对照的啊，这样大家看起来呢会更省事一些。先声明一下啊，这段视频中的英文字幕并没有经过演讲者自己的核对，所以可能有听写错误，而从英文到中文的翻译呢，也可能出现错误啊。我在制作这个视频的时候呢，就发现上次匆匆翻译的版本呢有一些小问题，所以错误是在所难免的啊。如果你发现文字上的问题呢，不管是英文的还是中文翻译，都请告诉我，谢谢了啊。好，我们进入正题，这前面的9分多钟呢，主要是对他的个人介绍，说的是西班牙语，我们也听不懂。我们从他站起来这段呢开始啊，他一口气讲了将近20分钟，比较长，所以加上我的解读呢会更长。因此，对于这个报告有兴趣的各位，就必须要有一点耐心了啊。他显然也是听不懂西班牙语的，有同声翻译。他刚站起来，声音还没切换好啊。然后前面这段寒暄的话呢，我们就快速播放。
Well, we have a lot we could discuss in a very short period of time, so I will summarize everything. We're in a mess. It's a mess. And we're not effectively getting out of the mess right now. Some basic points, which I'll just put on the headlines, and then we can discuss them.
这几句话呀，其实是他这段话20分钟演讲的主题。世界目前是一团糟。为了避免各位先入为主，所以我的注解呢，总是在大家看完他的一段演讲之后我再说啊。
First, we're at the end of the U.S. leadership period. A lot of the uncertainties that we feel right now are because the United States does not and cannot lead. But Europe does not fill the void, and Latin America in recent years has been completely deinstitutionalized. Also, no help of the United States as usual, which can't even hold a meeting without a fight in which 8 countries end up not showing up to Los Angeles last week. So Latin America is not in an organized state of affairs. Europe is clearly not.
我们有时候认为谁的话说的有道理，其实是他的话呀，正好与我们的想法一致。我们许多人的话也认可美国作为世界领袖的地位堪忧。他这里谈到的8个国家的缺席，指的就是6月8号在洛杉矶举办的第9届美洲峰会，有几个国家对美国的外交政策不满，因此没有派人参加。这样的事儿呢，在以前呢是完全不可能的事儿。好，我们接着看啊。
The U.S. has a mindset, U.S. government, that is, our state, has a mindset that it is still the world leader, which is rather preposterous given global realities, but it leads to tremendous mistakes. A failure of diplomacy, a failure to negotiate, a very harsh line against China.
也就是说，尽管大家都看出来了，美国未来的地位堪忧，但美国人自己还是认为是世界领袖，那么这就必然产生认知上的鸿沟啊。我们知道啊，一个人自以为很厉害的时候，问题就比较严重了啊。具体到某个人的反应的话，那就是从骄傲、自傲，很容易转变成自负啊。麻烦的呢，还会导致自暴自弃，甚至孤注一掷，对吧？
Which is completely contrary to the actual needs of the planet, because we need cooperation everywhere an us versus them mentality. So everybody is divided. Are you on our side or are you on the other side? We cannot function this way because every challenge we face is not about us versus them. COVID was not us versus them. It wasn't about vaccine nationalism. It wasn't about accusations. It was about getting a pandemic under control.
好，从这里开始呢，就提出了他的论点。我们整个世界更需要的是全球合作，而不是分歧。纷争你的，我的，你属于哪一部分的？这就是选边站的对抗思维。那么这样呢，整个世界会变得一团糟。
I'll add one provocative statement. We could take it up later. It may shock you or not shock you, or you may say, I already know that, Professor Sachs. But I chaired a commission for the Lancet for 2 years on COVID. I'm pretty convinced it came out of US lab biotechnology, not out of nature. Just to mention, after 2 years of intensive work on this. So it's a blunder, in my view, of biotech, not an accident of a natural spillover. We don't know for sure, I should be absolutely clear. But there's enough evidence that it should be looked into, and it's not being investigated. Not in the United States, not anywhere. And I think for real reasons, that they don't want to look underneath the rug too much. Well, that got us into a tremendous mess.
这一段呢，我在前面的那个视频中已经给大家播放过了，所以大家看了前面的那段话的背景呢，再看这段就非常清楚了啊。他其实是想表达战胜新冠疫情需要全球的合作。他说，从他对生物技术的认知来看，他非常确信这就是来自实验室的技术，而不是自然界产生的。但究竟如何产生的，需要进行调查，而不是遮遮掩掩。需要让我们看看地毯下面究竟有什么。特别强调了，他有足够的证据表明需要对美国的实验室进行调查，当然也涉及到全球一些相关国家和地区的配合，但强调的是美国啊，美国需要调查，可能全球都是这么想的，对不对？所以他所说的至少是我们全球大多数人的诉求啊。
Now we have a war that could have been avoided. It would have been avoided if the United States had not been so insistent on pushing NATO eastward and eastward and eastward. In this discussion that we sometimes have, because we don't have much of a public debate, it is claimed that the West never promised that NATO would not go eastward. Let me summarize by saying the West did promise very explicitly that NATO would not go eastward.
那么作为全球需要合作而不是对抗的第二个案例，他谈到了俄乌战争，认为这是一场完全可以避免的战争。西方社会在这方面有很大的责任，不信守承诺，所以很多事不能看目前的结果，而应该看是什么原因导致的。
Bill Clinton, who was not a very consequent leader for many reasons, pressure from Central European countries as well as the domestic vote, said, okay, we expand NATO eastward in the first wave. George W. Bush, who was a walking disaster from beginning to end of foreign policy, enlarged NATO 7 countries, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Slovenia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, right up to the Russian border. And then in 2008 had the great brainstorm, well, why don't we enlarge NATO all the way to Georgia? Take a look at the map. What is that about? This was supposed to be a defensive alliance against a country that no longer exists. Now it's on the other side of the Black Sea. My feeling is they were reliving the Crimean War age, that we have to bottle up Russia in the Black Sea.
那么他就谈到了从克林顿政府开始，因为投票延期，大家一合计，行呀，就开始东扩吧。然后到小布什做总统的时候外交政策从头到尾，他认为就是一场持续的灾难。他其实是很看不起小布什的还专门撰文批评过他。所以这句话呢，就说得很毒。 之后呢，一发不可收拾一直扩大到格鲁吉亚，导致2008年的那场战争。而发生这一切的原因是北约的持续东扩。
Well, that was Russia's attitude. I don't blame them whether that's right or wrong. That was their attitude. We should have negotiated. Refusal, 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 refusal to negotiate. Then came 2021. Biden came into office. Putin said, we need to negotiate this. The United States said, it's off the table. We don't negotiate this issue. I know it. I mean, I know inside what happened also. But they said no negotiation on NATO at all. 3 times in 2021.
大家看到俄乌战争是北约和美国拒绝谈判的结果。萨克斯完全能够理解俄罗斯的态度。
In the NATO summit, which you're about to host here in Madrid, and then in 2 declarations, one with the Defense Department and one with the State Department, the United States said, not only is NATO enlargement to Ukraine already cooked in, but we are increasing the military capacity. We're sending billions of dollars of arms. Okay, you don't think that's provocative? It's provocative.
因为萨克斯的讲话是在2022年北约峰会之前，而这次峰会呢是2周之后在西班牙首都马德里举办的。他这段话相当于打了一个预防针，几乎就明确揭露了美国就是要将北约的势力扩大到乌克兰，要让生米做成熟饭，然后就可以卖武器，这是挑衅。你们认为呢？
So we don't discuss those things because when I say those things in the United States, A, I can't get even published in an op-ed piece, which is usually something that is not quite an issue for me, having written thousands, and because no one wants to discuss these issues. No debate.
坦率地说之前我并没有认真关注过萨克斯，最近因为要做这些视频认真看了一些他之前的一些文章，他真的写了很多很多文章，在很多时候的认识我觉得与我还蛮一致的，所以下次呢我就成了他的粉丝。我们也可以看出他的言论在美国是受到限制的，所以我可以理解他在这里说话为什么要放得这么开。
Please, next week when you host NATO here, don't just say, oh yes, United States, you're so wise. Or, oh yes, we pour more weapons into Ukraine so that more can be destroyed. Please don't do that. Because European leaders have known for 14 years how dangerous that is, but they don't say it. I'd say all the European leaders except for the UK, which knows nothing, unfortunately, because all they know is follow the US. But the rest know. This is not right. This is dangerous. We need to negotiate. We need a different approach.
这里就是他对西班牙主办这次欧洲峰会的建议他能够理解为什么欧洲领导人在美国面前唯唯诺诺，不是不知道，而是觉得有危险。14年来都是这样，只有英国是个例外他们是什么都不知道，他们没有自己的立场，他们只知道跟着美国的屁股后面走。他呼吁我们其他的国家呢要有不同的办法。
Russia needs to leave, but we don't need to enter afterwards. So if we actually discussed, there's an agreement to be reached. But the point, by the way, is not to push Zelensky to discuss with Putin. That's meaningless. It's the US to discuss with Putin. That's the only negotiation that counts. What can Zelensky offer? The idea that we sit back and let Zelensky negotiate is an absurdity. It's a dodge of responsibility. The one responsible is the US president. He should discuss. Also in a multilateral setting, because this really should be handled by the UN Security Council, which is not impossible. The veto issue doesn't apply here because there's no meaning to anything unless Russia also agrees. So we need an agreement where we negotiate within the UN Security Council framework.
他这里呢就讨论的具体的办法是什么？不要在俄罗斯搞颜色革命。看来美丽风景线这个词啊，已经成了颜色革命的代名词了啊。这样的话就只会激化矛盾，对普京无用。解铃还须系铃人，问题是美国惹出来的，那么谈判的主体也应该是美国，是美国与俄罗斯谈判，而且这样的谈判呢，是在联合国安理会主持下，美国在多边环境中参与讨论，是这样的谈判，而不是像以前一样啊，美国挥舞着大棒在旁边逼迫别人就范。
China can be a constructive part of this agreement. And that raises another issue. The United States is on a war path with China. Why? I'll tell you why. Neurosis. Because the United States has a neurotic fear of China. And the reason is that China's a big country, and the United States is supposed to run the world. And if you're supposed to run the world in your own mind and you have this very large country, that creates a neurosis. And that's what we have. So everything is put in the worst possible terms. And everything is done in a hostile way. And how safe is it for Taiwan to have the United States every day saying, we will defend Taiwan, we will defend Taiwan? That's about the most dangerous thing you can say for Taiwan. All it does is raise the fear, raise the temperature factor. It's not calming anything. It's not defending anybody. It's just creating more anxiety. But that's the US mindset.
这里呢就说到了他对中国目前在全球的作用呢是持肯定态度的，而且美国与中国发生的冲突，原因就是美国是神经病，对中国的恐惧。不愿失去主宰世界的地位，认为中国这个大国给他们带来了麻烦，那怎么办？就找麻烦呗，所以就把台湾问题搞起来。但这样呢，只会让台湾更危险。大家觉得这是不是说到我们心坎里去了？好在这个讲话呀是在西班牙说的，如果是在中国说的，肯定就有一帮人认为，他为中国收买了。这帮人呢纯粹是小人之心嘛啊。
It comes back to my first point. We're in a post-American unipolar world, if there ever was such a thing, even for a moment. But we are in a multipolar world. But that means to take responsibility each region.
他这里就直接点出，世界已经发生了变化，从美国主宰的单极世界，已经演变成多极世界了。这前面的内容呢，主要是国际政治或者是地缘政治方面的问题啊。后面谈到的可持续发展的问题，那么我可以多说一些啊。而且呢，全球可持续发展的问题本身，再一次论证我们的星球目前需要的是合作，而不是对抗。
That's the key. The interesting thing about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they cannot be achieved country by country, anywhere. At a minimum, you need regional cooperation. Thanks God for the European Union, because that makes it possible for Europe to achieve a European Green Deal. Try that 27 times separately. Completely impossible. But as a union, it's possible. So the name of the game in this world is regional cooperation, and then the regions cooperating with each other. It's a little bit different from a country-by-country architecture. We need a strong European Union. We need a strong African Union. We need a strong Latin America. What exactly? But we do need a strong Latin America, unified.
联合国可持续发展目标任重而道远，一定要国家和地区之间的联合。如果不是特意要进行对抗，那么任何强大的地区和联盟啊，都对全球可持续发展有好处的。游戏规则已经发生变化了，需要的是区域合作，而不是对抗。
Not divided. Okay, we're on this side on Venezuela. We're on this side on Cuba. That's a U.S. game. That's not a Latin American game. That's a U.S. game. Latin America should be unified. The issues are the same everywhere, by the way. how to make the energy transformation, how to upgrade education, how to build core infrastructure, how to bring in marginal groups. It's the same issues. How to raise technology standards, how to improve research and development capacity. This is a common Latin American and I'd say and Caribbean program. Not, well, we'll do it, but can't have Bolivia, can't have Nicaragua, can't have Cuba, can't have Venezuela. That's the other side, not our side. This is impossible. It makes no sense. It's a US mentality.
这一段也很直白，要大家选边站，这是美国人的游戏，不是你们该有的。你们只管发展自己就好，去解决实际存在的问题。
And by the way, I'm sure you know it, it's all about capturing the electoral votes in Florida. It has nothing to do with anything. Do you think Trump knew who Maduro was or could care less? Not at all. But he was told by Marco Rubio that that's essential for the 2020 vote in Florida. So all of Latin America gets turned on its head because of a local state election in the United States. Honestly, I'm not exaggerating.
这段呢，他就顺便举了一个例子，美国总统选举在乎的是什么？美国的地方州选举，美国一些领导人的行为会转化为影响其他地区的矛盾，这是不可思议的。这其实不是大家所希望看到的，但目前呢，就是这个样子的。
This is how weird it is. Otherwise, Trump could not put Venezuela on a map and could care less except maybe to build a golf course there.
但是美国领导人真的在乎这些地区吗？他甚至举了一个例子啊，作为一个地产商，特朗普更在乎在哪里建一个高尔夫球场，劣心了不是啊？
So this is weird, but the region needs to get together. Stop the divisions. Unify, talk about infrastructure, talk about a zero carbon energy system. Chile is doing wonderful things expanding in the Atacama with massive solar energy. And then you have Paraguay and Brazil with Itaipu, and you have incredible wind power in Patagonia. And you start putting the pieces together, you've got a superpower of renewable energy. But it has to be interconnected. It has to be regional cooperation. And every other region of the world should figure this out too.
其实当务之急的事儿好多好多，大家应该团结起来解决这些问题，而不是相互甩锅、相互拆台。美国的许多做法都是逆潮流而动的，感觉啊，萨克斯有一些恨铁不成钢的意味。
The United States is working overtime to say China here, Japan and Korea here. If those three would ever figure it out, from an economic point of view, by the way, those three countries are the world's superpower of technology right now. And if they ever work together, oh my God, what it would mean. By the way, I think it would be good for the world. You'd have a superpower of technological innovation coming, which is good for the world, not bad for the world.
从逻辑上讲，他这句话与前面的是相互呼应的。任何区域联盟对世界都有好处。中日韩3个国家的联盟啊，他认为可成为技术创新的超级力量，当然对全球呢是有好处了。那么这对于美国来说肯定是一个威胁，那么就可想而知美国会怎么样做。
But the US is very keen. You're on our side. You're on the Quad. We need a new alliance. China's dangerous, and so forth. So it's trying in a very weird way to create these divisions and these conflicts everywhere.
他们肯定会瓦解这种可能的联盟，让你们的联合消失在萌芽状态。只要出现任何苗头，就一定会捣乱的。一个很典型的案例就是中日韩自贸区的建立。这事儿从2002年就提出了构想，耽搁了10年，2021年重新启动谈判，但又是一而再再而三的搁置。至今呢又10年过去了， 还是没有实现。一旦这3个国家呀开始准备进行这个谈判的时候，美国就让领土争端，还有一些历史问题迅速成为问题，目的呢就是千方百计的阻碍中日韩自贸区的建立。
Final point, just in opening remarks for us, is that sustainable development is not a nice thing to do. There's no alternative. There's chaos, or there's sustainable development. It's not an ideological option. It's we fall into not just 40-degree Celsius days in Madrid, but God knows what is going to happen as we hit tipping points on the climate, which we're going to hit year after year now. And it's much more dangerous than just the temperature going up another degree. I had the unhappy anxiety of heading a scientific institute on these issues for 15 years at Columbia. And I learned that climate scientists are the most soft-spoken, terrifying people in the world. Because if you sit down with someone who really knows, not with me, but say with my colleague James Hansen, you walk out shaking. Because in the quiet way, they'll explain to you how the Earth's systems are absolutely going to be in a state of unprecedented change in the history of civilization, undermining all basic assumptions of the last 10,000 years, like where to put cities near coasts. Great, now we have multi-meter sea level rise getting cooked in by the disintegration of the West Antarctic ice sheet. Or what happens when another of my, when my brilliant late Columbia University climatologist Wally Broker is shown to be right. He discovered the ocean circulation picture that you've seen, how the water descends in the deep ocean in the North Atlantic and then circles the world. That's called the thermohaline circulation, and it's a discovery of the last 60 years, and it was by this brilliant man. And he said the global warming and the implications of that could stop this circulation, and even merely slow it down or stop it. It is slowing now, we know. That means that the Gulf Stream and all the rest that is part of the circulation is changing fundamentally. And the dangers of that are multiple. And there are many tipping points around the world like this. We don't have a choice. And there's no real scientific debate. There's uncertainties, for sure. But the basics are actually quite well known.
那么这一段他再次试图让大家明白，可持续发展问题、气候变化的问题，才是我们目前碰到的最重要的问题。大家要多想想这些问题。
And yet, if we're going to be having war in Ukraine and refighting the Crimean War that is 170 years ago, and having our conflict with China, which goes back to the Opium Wars of 1839, and it's like America wants to relive all of the greatest dates of the British Empire. If we go through that, there is no way we're going to solve any of these problems, period. So unless we sit down, discuss, bring the scientists in, bring the engineers in, bring the public in, calm down, meet with each other, understand that we're in a common fate. Unless we do all of those things, as I said at the start, it's a mess. Thank you very much.
从这个内容我们就可以看出，萨克斯对历史的把握很真实。他说到了鸦片战争，这也许是英国人的风光，但是是中国人的痛。当然这一切呢都回不去了。他这里说的 common fate 呢，我特意翻译成命运共同体，因为他这段话的总体思想与我们人类命运共同体的概念是一脉相承的。另外我也提醒大家萨克斯发布的有关新冠病毒的挑衅性声明在这段20分钟的讲话中，大概有1分钟左右，是仅仅作为一个案例提出来的，并不是为了特意爆料什么事儿他主要是想说，我们的未来还有更多的事儿需要世界的团结、全球的合作。 避免战争也是如此，解决可持续发展的问题、气候变化问题，这些都需要全球性的合作。网上有人对于他的这段讲话呀不以为然，认为可能是一个陷阱，说我信你个鬼，你个糟老头子坏得很。我们大家也看完了这段视频了啊，你们觉得呢？在这个报告之后呢，就是其他人的讨论，然后针对他的讲话提了许多的问题，他对这些问题呢进行了针对性的回答，也非常精彩。如果大家喜欢我这种解读方式的话，请用弹幕告诉我。如果有足够多的人想看，以后有空的时候啊，我就再给大家慢慢解读。毕竟这个不是计划之中的事啊，是突然增加的一个内容。我是复旦赵斌，今天的解读呢就到这里，谢谢大家的关注，再见。